A shift in the Galactic Council. As the iridescent light from the luminous stars streamed through the arched windows of the Galactic Council chamber, a somber mood hung in the air. Each representative from countless races across the cosmos sat on the edge of their seats, their hearts heavy with anticipation. The recent events involving the Veritans and humans had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, their repercussions still echoing through the council halls. At the heart of the council chamber, Ambassador Solane, the human representative, sat nursing his wounds, both physical and emotional. He was a figure of sympathy, having survived a recent assassination attempt. His survival and return to the council only solidified his image as a resilient and committed leader. Yet, the scars on his face were a grim reminder of the Veritans' treachery. On the opposite end of the chamber sat Ambassador Varro, the Veritan representative. His features were hardened, his expression resolute. He was a warrior at heart, representing a proud race of fighters. Yet, his current predicament weighed heavily on him. His people were vilified, their reputation in ruins. The recent attack on a human vessel by a rogue Veritan faction had only deepened the chasm between the two races. The council session began, the speakers voicing their concerns, one after the other. When it was Solane's turn, he stood, his presence filling the chamber. Honorable members of the council, he began, the humans have been the victims of an unprovoked attack by the Veritans. This is not an isolated incident, but a pattern of aggression that we have borne witness to. His words echoed around the chamber, a tangible reminder of the humans' plight. He recounted the bombing attempt on their flagship, the resurgence, and the subsequent attack on their vessel by a Veritan ship. The memory of these events still hung heavy in the chamber. As he concluded his speech, he turned to look directly at Ambassador Varro. "We had started on a path of friendship, Varro," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "It's a shame that it has come to this." Varro met Solane's gaze, a mixture of frustration and regret in his eyes. "Indeed, Solane," he replied. "We both know that there are forces in our respective worlds that do not want peace, that thrive in chaos and destruction." He paused, then continued, "But I assure you, the Veritans are not the villains here. We are victims, too, of a game that we are yet to fully comprehend." As the council broke for recess, the murmurs of discussion filled the chamber. The stage was set, and the seeds of dissent were sown. The galaxy was on the brink of a war, a conflict that could ravage the cosmos and change the face of the Galactic Council forever. The question was, who would make the next move? Who would tip the scales towards peace, or push them into the abyss of war? The call to arms. Back in Veritan space, the situation was tense. The once proud Veritan fleet lay dormant, their powerful warships floating like lifeless specters against the backdrop of distant stars. It was an ominous sight, a stark contrast to the bustling energy that usually defined Veritan space. Within the war rooms of the Veritan Command Center, high-ranking officers huddled around holographic screens. Their faces were stern, their gaze focused on the myriad of blips representing human ships strategically positioned around their territory. The images served as a constant reminder of the humans' silent takeover, their insidious creep into Veritan sovereignty. Supreme Admiral Kever, the Veritan military's highest-ranking official, stood in the middle of the room, his brow furrowed in deep thought. The Veritans were a race of warriors, and he was a warrior through and through. Yet, he found himself in a predicament that he had never anticipated. His fleet was immobilized, his warriors disheartened, and his enemies encroaching on Veritan space. "Admiral, our fleet is still intact. Our warriors are ready to fight," said Commander Verrix, breaking the tense silence in the room. "We cannot let the humans dictate our fate." "You're right, Verrix," Admiral Kever replied. "We've been dormant for too long. It's time we showed the humans the might of the Veritans." Thus, a clandestine operation was set into motion. A group of their most elite warriors was assembled for a strategic strike against the humans. Their target was a human command ship positioned at the outskirts of Veritan space. Their objective was simple: to make a powerful statement, to prove that the Veritans were far from defeated. Meanwhile, back at the Galactic Council, Ambassador Varro received a coded message. His eyes widened as he read the message. The Veritan military was preparing for a strike. He understood the gravity of the situation, yet he couldn't shake off a feeling of grim satisfaction. His people were fighting back. As the council session resumed, Ambassador Varro addressed the council. "Honorable council members, the Veritans have been silent, we've been patient. But we cannot stand by while our sovereignty is threatened." His voice echoed around the chamber, a plea, a warning. "The Galactic Council let the humans have strategically positioned their ships around our territory. They've taken up peacekeeping roles without our consent. This is a blatant power play, a clear violation of our sovereignty. His voice grew stronger, more determined. We demand the immediate withdrawal of human forces from Veritan space. Or else, I fear we might be heading towards a war that no one wants. The council chamber fell silent, the weight of Varro's words sinking in. The Veritans had drawn a line in the sand, their patience wearing thin. The council had to make a decision, to take a stand. The future of the galaxy hinged on their next move. Little did they know, back in Veritan space, the wheels of war had already been set in motion. The Veritans were not waiting for the council's decision. They were taking matters into their own hands. The first strike. As the Galactic Council chamber thrummed with fervent debate and concealed threats, the boundless void of Veritan space was preparing to host the first act of defiance. A small, agile Veritan strike team, led by Commander Verrix, flawlessly carried out their mission, slipping through the icy vacuum in stealth cruisers. They aimed for the human command ship, the Vanguard. Their orders were unambiguous: deal a devastating blow to the humans, the opening gambit in the war that was on the horizon. Unaware of the brewing storm, the crew of the Vanguard went about their duties, their surveillance equipment revealing nothing more than the endless expanse of twinkling stars. They were on the periphery of Veritan territory, far removed from the central fleet. Their defenses were lowered, complacency had crept in. Commander Verrix's team was ready. They had approached the Vanguard unnoticed. The tension on the bridge of the Veritan cruiser was palpable. Each team member grasped the gravity of their mission. This was more than a strike against the humans, it was the first riposte in the Veritans' fight back. Determination etched their faces. There was no retreat. Fire, ordered Verrix, his voice a chilling calm. The cruiser's weapon systems vibrated to life, a barrage of high-energy torpedoes cutting through the void towards the oblivious Vanguard. They hit with savage force, piercing the human ship's shields like gossamer, jarring the colossal vessel with a succession of thunderous explosions. Aboard the Vanguard, turmoil ensued. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and crew members tumbled as the ship tilted ominously. Captain Griggs, struggling to maintain his balance, hollered commands to his crew, his face reflecting shock and incredulity. They were unprepared, their ship critically wounded. The Veritans had delivered the first punch. Back at the Galactic Council, news of the attack spread rapidly. The Galactic Council, still in session, was shocked by the audacious strike. Ambassador Solane stood, reeling from the report he was receiving. He had underestimated the Veritans. He'd assumed that their bravado on the Galactic Council was mere posturing. He was mistaken. The Veritans, they've attacked the Vanguard, Solane murmured, his voice barely a whisper. He could sense the unease around him, the waves of shock and rage radiating through the room. War was no longer a distant threat. It was an imminent reality. The Veritan attack marked the onset of a conflict that risked engulfing the galaxy. The Galactic Council was in disarray, alliances tested and strained. In the eye of the storm were two erstwhile friends, Ambassadors Solane and Varro, their friendship threatening to fracture under the burden of their duties. As news of the successful strike reached Veritan space, a wave of somber satisfaction swept over Supreme Admiral Kever. The operation was a success, the initial blow delivered, the initial stand made. The Veritans were not vanquished. They were just gearing up. However, despite the minor victory, Kever couldn't shake off a sense of impending disaster. War wasn't a solution. It was a cataclysm that would alter the face of the galaxy, leave wounds that would take millennia to heal. The Veritans were a warrior race, but they were not warmongers. They sought peace, harmony, a place among the stars. But the humans had provoked them, cornered them. They had left them with no alternative. Deep in space, the stars silently watched the shifting tide. A war was coming. The galaxy would never be the same again. The standoff, the Galactic Council chamber hummed with tension. The news of the strike against the Vanguard still echoed through the room. Alliance lines were drawn and redrawn in hushed whispers, and the gears of war began to grind in the corridors of power across the galaxy. Ambassador Varro, draped in the vibrant hues of his native Veritan attire, took the floor. He was not a warrior, but a diplomat. Yet, in these desperate times, he found himself standing firm for his people, justifying an act of aggression. The Veritan Empire did not instigate this situation, he declared, his voice steady despite the underlying tension. We sought a diplomatic resolution. Our appeals for equality, for respect of our sovereignty, were dismissed. Around him, murmurs of agreement rippled from his allies, the Gorgons and Colorans. The Council had become a stage for interstellar politics, a powder keg ready to ignite. In response, Ambassador Solane rose, his expression a mask of calm determination. He was well versed in the delicate dance of diplomacy, and the lives of countless citizens of New Terra now depended on his skills. "The humans did not strike first," he said, meeting Varro's gaze. "We have suffered losses, we have been provoked. Yet, we have acted with restraint. The attack on the Vanguard was unprovoked and serves to show the true intentions of the Veritans. The Veritans can't forget their human cull. The Veritans only want humanity eradicated, even now." The room fell silent. The weight of the situation pressed down upon every delegate, every observer. The galaxy stood on the brink of a massive conflict, and this chamber was the fulcrum. Outside the council chambers, fleets began to mobilize. In Veritan space, Supreme Admiral Kever rallied his forces, their sleek ships ready to defend their homeland. Across the light years, in the shipyards of New Terra, a similar scene unfolded. The humans, their pride stung by the surprise attack, prepared their response. The stage was set for a confrontation that could define the course of the galaxy. Despite the looming threat, both Varro and Solane made a final attempt to quell the rising tide of war. In a private conversation away from the cacophony of the council, they spoke as friends, as beings who wished for peace. "I did not want this, Solane," Varro said, his voice heavy with regret. "I know," Solane responded. "Neither did I." But their personal feelings were swept aside by the surge of conflict. The attack on the Vanguard had pushed both races past the point of no return. Their friendship gone, their trust shattered. They stood on opposite sides of a divide that grew wider with every passing moment. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the echoes of countless debates, the calls for war drowning out the pleas for peace. As Solane returned to the chamber, he found himself faced with an ominous holographic display of the galaxy, Veritan, and human territories highlighted in stark contrast. His fleet was approaching the Veritan border. Back in the Veritan space, Admiral Kever stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Praetorian, staring at a similar display. He could see the silhouettes of the human ships moving towards the Veritan territory. His heart pounded in his chest. The galaxy held its breath. The Veritans and humans, once near allies, now found themselves at an impasse. Their fleet stood face to face at the Veritan border, a battle line drawn in the stars. The final words in the council were from Ambassador Varro, his voice echoing in the chamber, "We have made our stand. We will not be moved." The council chamber fell silent. A sense of dread permeated through the air. A full-blown galactic war loomed ominously, threatening to erupt and engulf the stars. This was no longer a mere dispute. The Veritans and humans, on the brink of war, were about to draw the entire galaxy into the fray.